Good man of business, Jacob.
Business. Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence, all these were my business.
Hey, welcome to Restless the Podcast, tidal wave number 1. You know, in this Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, as presented in this 1938 film, Jacob Marley is attempting to change the direction of Scrooge's mortal life by telling him what the real business of mankind should be, and that is ministering to the suffering. In fact, in the next scene, Marley shows him how he, as a spirit, has been doomed to walk the face of the earth, trying to comfort the suffering mortals to no avail. Is this just more than a Christmas classic, or perhaps is there a message in there to us from Dickens about perhaps how we should live in the face of suffering?
Suffering had been on our hearts and minds a lot this Christmas season due to the passing of a dear family member just a few days before Christmas, which made it a harder season, as that was certainly on our hearts and minds, but also gave us pause and time to reflect about just how during this season, which is supposed to be all about joy, how do we find joy in the midst of that suffering? And I'm reminded of a quote by a favorite academic of mine, Jordan Peterson. He's a professor of psychology. When asked about the meaning of life and how he would comfort someone struggling with that question and who has been suffering or facing depression, he said this: "Being is suffering, tainted by malevolence, but there's pain to alleviate, there's chaos to be confronted, there is order to be established and revivified, and most importantly, there is evil to be constrained, and least not in your own heart." And as I reflected on that, I thought about, to me, who is the greatest example of doing all those things, of taking on the burden of suffering to effect a goodness that is worth it, that is bigger, that is greater than suffering. And I just think about who this season is all about, for Jesus. And in 2 Corinthians it says, "God made him who had no sin to become sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God." So he who had not to suffer chose to do so that we wouldn't have to anymore. And that is the most comforting thought I've had in the midst of all of it.
And not only that, Christ himself, in the midst of suffering, was the one who was alleviating the pain of others, who was, in fact, constraining chaos and restoring order in people's lives. And where evil existed, he met it head on. In fact, Jesus said this in John 16:33. He says, "I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." This wasn't an issue of if there's suffering. There's an issue that there will be suffering. And many of you listening to us right now, knows exactly what we're talking about because you're experiencing it. But maybe the message to us is like Jacob Marley was trying to change the course of Scrooge's life, was about the business of mankind can be about being those agents of change to ease the pain of others' suffering, bringing about order to chaos where there is, and even constraining evil.
I'm reminded of the lesson in that story that the second spirit to visit Scrooge tells him, the spirit of Christmas present. "Scrooge, we spirit of Christmas do not live just one day of the year, but all 365. So true is that of the child born in Bethlehem, but you have not chosen to seek him in your heart." And so how might that change? How might we alter the course of our own suffering and those around us by seeking the child born in Bethlehem? Well, that very child who grew up to say this: "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul?" And surely, as Marley warned Scrooge, Scrooge was profiting for himself, but giving up his soul. We too, like Scrooge and Marley, are in danger of losing our souls. We must give up these selfish lives. We must take up the cross of alleviating suffering in the lives of others. And in doing so, we find meaning. And in that meaning, despite suffering, is what we call joy.
We want to thank you for listening in to Tidal Wave number 1. Perhaps then our mission this Christmas season is not to lament in the fact that we suffer, but in that suffering there is opportunity by which to change that, by bringing relief to those who are in pain, to constraining chaos and restoring order in the lives of others, and confronting and constraining evil when you come upon it. So in that, we want to wish you Merry Christmas.
And that was our first Tidal Wave, number 1. Tidal Waves are just going to be small shorts like that we're going to put a couple up each week. Just things that have been on our hearts and minds that we'd like to share with you for a little bit of encouragement and to keep those restless hearts of yours churning. So keep your eyes peeled to see more of those put up as the weeks go on. And we should be getting our full-blown episode 2 out, hopefully within about the next week and a half as well. So keep listening. And Merry Christmas from those of us here at Restless the Podcast. See you soon.